Okay, so I feel like there's some videos that need to be made about the Rush that surprisingly nobody's done, and I'm by no means a content creator, but I'm gonna just make some general videos. I feel like there's some owners out there that might be interested in seeing some of this stuff, as simple as some of it is. You know, it's some of the things that you're excited about in anticipation. And then being like at Mid-Ohio and CMP and seeing for Grid Life and seeing some of the other owners asking me questions about some of the maintenance things and the way that I do things. Not saying it's the way that Rush tells you to do it, but I think they work. I've got, you know, 35 hours or so on the car, and in my first year of ownership, and I've done my fair share of tracking for 1 year, I think, but looking forward to many more years. So this video is just going to be very simple and just going to show some random stuff about what I do to a car in between track events. So for full disclosure, I literally just unloaded the car out of the trailer the other day and brought it in the shop, and I've been working and haven't had a second to touch it. And so I'm going to just kind of start with you know, removing the body and putting it on jack stands, and how I do that, and then things that I'm looking at, things I'm looking for, things I'm cleaning and lubricating. Those are all going to be kind of things that I'm going to talk about on here. I'm not due for an oil change or any of that stuff yet, so I'm not going to be changing any fluids. I just did it right before Grid Life Mid-Ohio. But I'll definitely go through some other stuff and hopefully hit on some key points that, you know, some of y'all are interested in watching. Okay, so for starters, I want to remove the rear clamshell. So we just have these two clips here. Sorry for the shaking. You've got, some of mine are getting a little tight. I've got to replace them or lubricate them as I'm going to fight this one. And then we have one here, one here, and these are just simple. You just push down on the center, pop it up, okay. Come over to the other side, okay, just like that. Okay. Pretty easy peasy. Alright, now from there, just going to scoot your arms under the wing, pick it up off, walk back. Now technically, you should put that on horses. Rush would tell you it needs to be on horses. I do put mine on horses occasionally. It's a little bit easier to do it off the floor when you're by yourself. It's easier to put it on horses with a friend. Not saying you can't do it. I've done it, but when I'm in the shop, mine sits on the floor. And don't mind my shop, it's a mess. I'm all clustered in here, but I'm gonna go ahead and do the front clamshell now, and we'll show you that one. So here we got a couple. You always want to start with your fender ones. It's gonna take the pressure off all your other ones. Okay. You got 4 of your catches. Okay. And that's it for all your first pops. Okay. Now if you come in the front, put your feet in front of the splitter, lift it up. You want to set it down right here. You got to unplug your headlight. Once again, not doing it the way that Rush would recommend, but it works. So to each their own. Everybody's got to find their own way. What I can tell, if you didn't notice, the duct tape on this fender right here from some guy I won't mention running into me. It might have been my fault. It was definitely my fault, but I feel like I'm going to replace my body panels before sitting them on the floor. It's going to do any damage to them, so I'm not too worried about it. But all right, I'm going to jack it up and show you where I place jack stands, and then we'll start checking things out. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to jack the car up and put it on jack stands front and rear. Now a little bit of a pro tip for you is 2 jacks. Okay, the reason why is once you get on this back lift point, which is your exhaust right here, okay, you're going to push the front to the ground, and it's going to get so low by the time you get the back up on jack stands that you're not going to be able to get a jack underneath the front, or at least that's been in my experience. I don't have any super duper low profiles jacks. Obviously that one's pretty low, but even with two of those I still couldn't get underneath the front when the back gets up. So I'm going to go ahead and jack this thing up, and I'll show you where I place my jack stands. You do have to get it pretty high, but if we go under here and look, you will notice a nice little reprieve in the frame right there, and another one right there. In between that is your oil pan, and your drain plug is right there, the tip of my finger. Okay, now from there I'm fine with that height. That's perfectly fine. I'm gonna let it down easy. Okay, I'll leave the jack there for safety purposes. Alright, now the front. Now I'd go on this bar right here underneath the crash box. Okay, you can see there's a bar there. All I'm doing, very simple. Just want to jack it up high enough that I can put it on those stands. Keep in mind it is balancing now, so you want to be careful. You know, the nicest part about working on this car is there's nothing you really need to do from the underside of the car, with the exception of pulling the drain plug, which you could do from the top. So what you want to do is just get it high enough off the ground. So you can see I put one on each side. Nothing more, nothing less. Again, I'll leave the jack there for safety purposes. Now the car is up in the air. Plenty enough for me to be able to sit on a stool, work around the car, just give everything a shake and a wiggle before I start pulling my tires and wheels off, so I have that leverage. And then I'll clean and lubricate all the joints, and I'll show you how I kind of work through that. Alright, so full disclosure, the car is very dirty, covered in mud. I may or may not have went off-roading in mid-Ohio more than once. So I just blew the car out with some compressed air. I didn't figure I needed to show you that. But you know, you would just want to blow out your side pod areas. Going through the sides, you'll get a lot of stuff in there, especially at sandy tracks. And obviously you can see the mud that's still on this tire. And so that's just mud from dropping 2 tires in China Beach, maybe twice. In here, what you have here is, grab the shop lights. So what you have here, for those of you who have never seen, so you have a compressor and your tank, your GPU, which controls your compressor and tank pressure, and I don't know what other stuff. We'd have to ask Rush about that. And then obviously you've got air lines running back to your air shifter and a relay for your shifter back there. So, but those are the types of things that are going to get all dirty, and you want to clean them off anytime you can. And obviously cleanliness is a big key to maintenance on these cars. Now it might not look like it because the car is filthy. Prior to going to mid-Ohio, I had this thing spotless. I mean, relatively spotless. So, and as you can see now, I've got crud and mud and stuff that I've still got to blow out more. And so I've definitely got my work cut out for me to get this thing cleaned back up. But for starters, what I do is get it up in the air, okay? And then obviously you can see all the suspension parts. And all I'm gonna do is sit down and well, that's viewing, but I just want to do some side to side like this, some up and down. And what you're looking for and feeling for is any sort of movement in your ball joints or your tire rod ends. You should really have almost none. I got a little bit of play in my outside tire rod end right here. Inside looks pretty tight. You want to grab a hold of all things like sway bar ends. Make sure that you've got movement in them, your shocks, tire rod ends. Inspect your control arms. You want to be looking for any sort of paint cracking. You also want to lay down on your back and look at it from the bottom. You know, we've seen control arms that have gotten bent from hitting curbs really hard, and so you want to make sure that the arms are still straight with one another and you don't have any arms that aren't. And those are the types of things you want to work all the way around the car and go to every wheel. Okay. Again, if I set this down right here, okay, so again, I'm just looking for side to side, looking for up and down. Okay, and obviously you're going to have movement in your brake rotor, and that's what you're hearing there, the hat on the brake rotor. But other than that, everything is nice and tight. Okay. Obviously, when it comes to the back of the car, you have a lot more things. You know, again, shocks, make sure that everything's got movement, sway bar ends, CV axles, tire rods, make sure that everything's got movement but no play. Okay, again, you want to inspect your control arms, looking for chipped or cracked paint anywhere in them, and I'll get a light back here and inspect them a lot closer in the bright light. Okay, you want to make sure your diff adjusters are nice and tight. All your paint markings you're also looking at. You can see I have paint markings on everything, and I'll show you them in a little bit more detail. But so again, you're just grabbing, shaking, twisting, pulling, checking all your paint markings. Here, you see I have everything marked, all your tightness on your tie rod ends. Okay, and then you have to get a mirror so you can look in here to see this tie rod bolt down here, and I'll show you how you do that. And I also get mirrors to look at the bottom of your control arms and the paint markings that are in here. So you can see those still look good. There's certain key ones, like this one right here, your lower ball joint upper nut. All right, those are some key ones that'll back out. Of course, you always want to check your CV bolts. These two will back out. Sometimes the paint gets a little smeary, so pardon me on that. I'm going to go ahead and get a mirror, and I'll show you a few of the harder to see bolts. And again, you can see these upper control arms. Now, I had some curbs that I hit. I'll probably replace these bolts. We've noticed that these are a preventative maintenance item, these upper control arm bolts. They'll get bent from too many hits of hard curbs, so it's always a good idea to go ahead and replace those. Maybe every weekend, maybe every other weekend. I mean, it's a cheap maintenance item. If those two bolts break, ask me. I've done it a few times. It's going to tear up the outside of the CV axle, completely destroy this boot. You'll have to rebuild the outside of the CV because it'll put such a torque load on it. It usually kills my outside tire rod end and my ball joint, sometimes lower and upper, or just one. It depends. I've had it a little bit of each. So I'm going to get a mirror and I'll show you how to see some of the harder ones. So now I have my handy dandy mirror. You never want to leave home without one of these. You should always have one in the trailer. These things are great. And don't mind, I got cats in my garage. Hey, kitty, kitty. So on the fronts, there's not so many bolts that are hard to see. You do have one that is right down in there. Okay, and it's very hard to see, but that is the upper ball, the lower ball joint upper nut. So you want to make sure that your paint marking's there on that one, which I can see that it is. And then you're also going to want to go for the lower and make sure that your paint marking is on your nut on the lower. Okay, and then obviously I've also got paint marking on the upper nut here. And again, I've got a paint marker on that nut there. You can see it's pretty much just covered in paint, I could tell. Need to clean that one up and do that a little bit nicer. But you can see that again, everything else has paint markings on it, all the control arm bolts, everything. And so those are, you can see sway bars, everything is paint marked all the way around the car. Super important. Now the number one bolt on the entire car is this tire rod bolt right here, which I can't see, I need a light. Let's see if I can place this light appropriately. But so you can see in that image there is a paint mark in there lined up with that outer tire rod bolt. That is the number one bolt I've noticed on this car that will back out on you. And so when you put it in there, Loctite, make sure it's nice and clean, fresh Loctite, tighten it down, and if you can, let it cure for 24 hours before you drive the car. Not necessary, but if you go right out and run it, make sure that you check it quickly in between your next run. Again, I'm just going to set this light in here. So the other bolts were these ones here. Again, you can see the paint markings are good. And then another one would be this upper control arm bolt, which you can see right down there. I'll signify it right there, and the light is not in a good spot. There it is. You can see that bolt there is another one of the ones that'll back off on you and is a little bit tougher to get to. Okay, and then again, you want to make sure that all of your CV bolts inside and out. See, there's paint markings on all of them. Same with all of your diff bolts here. You can see those ones are already wired tight. So make sure that all these bolts are tight. If any of these bolts back out when you're going down the track, it is not going to be a good day. And don't mind me, I'm sweating. It's hot in here. It is not going to be a good day. There's plenty of videos out there from guys having those tire rod bolts back out and having their tire turn on them at 100 miles an hour. That's not a ride anybody wants to go on. So again, key to owning one of these cars is maintenance. It's not hard, it's not rocket science, but you've got to keep on top of it. All right, so I would say the best part about these cars is they're just super easy to work on, and obviously being a prototype style car rather than a road car, when you want to work on something, it's literally wide open. I mean, I don't have to stick my head in a fender well, I don't have to remove the fender from a car. It's literally super easy to work on. So I'm just going to show you some of the things that I do. Now I'm going to go ahead and say that this is not maybe how Rush recommends. Again, this is just what's been working for me. I do tend to replace parts prematurely just because I'd rather be safe than sorry. So if I get even the smallest bit of movement in a joint, even the most minuscule that maybe some people would be like, oh, send it, no, I'm replacing it. Obviously, unless I'm in a pinch at the track and I have another race and I've just got to trust it. But however, Rush pretty much says that you should not use brake clean. Instead, you should clean everything with WD-40, which I think works most of the time. But there are times where, especially your upper, but mostly your lower ball joint, will get really cruddy down in there, especially when you have off-track excursions. And so I've found that the best thing to do, I'll hold a light here like a ninja, is take a little brake clean because it's got a little more pressure. Okay, blow it out, get all around the arm. You want to really flush that thing out really good. Okay, and then I'll take a rag and get down in there, and you can take a screwdriver and run that around the best you want to. Obviously, you can turn the wheel, get yourself a little bit more in there. You could turn it back, go to the other side, get your finger in there good, dig it in there good. But then what I like to do is, before that brake clean is even clean, you take your WD-40, okay, and I will just fill it up like a puddle, and then I'll just let it sit there. I won't actually wipe it out, I just let it be, okay. Now once you start doing that, I don't do it every single time to every joint. So like this upper, I could just choose to use WD, okay, and WD works as a pretty good cleaner as well. It's just sometimes you need that brake clean pressure to get into somewhere, okay. But again, just give it a real good wipe out, wipe the housing, everything around it, okay. And I mean, it'll get relatively clean. I haven't even really put much time into it, okay, but you can see it's got it pretty clean, okay. I mean, you're not going to get it perfect, guys. It's a race car. Maybe some of y'all have all the time in the world to spend 100 hours in between a track weekend. I do not. I'm usually turning a car around in an hour or two, because that's just what works for me. So again, that's basically cleaning the upper. And again, don't forget there's a lower side to that, and you can just take some WD, shove it up in there. It's really hard to try to get a rag to get up into that bottom there. Pretty much nearly impossible. But that WD, as it falls on all the surrounding bits, you can just keep wiping those bits down. Don't worry about getting a little bit on the brake rotors or that. It'll all clean off, Who cares if you can't stop for a turn or two? It'll wear off. I'm just kidding. It'll probably really be fine. I've not had any problems. I don't straight up spray my big brake pads either. But biggest thing to keep in mind is, as you're doing this wiping and cleaning, sometimes you can wipe your paint marks off, depending on what you're using to mark them. So just be mindful of that. If you do wipe it off, make sure you mark it again, so that way you're not at your next track event and questioning yourself on whether it really loosened up or not. So, but I'm going to finish cleaning this side here, and then I'll show it to you when I'm done. Okay, once you get it all cleaned off, which again, I mean, I didn't go too crazy here. It's just going to go right back out on track and get dirty, but I made sure that I got in all the joints. Make sure, don't forget about the lower. I know I didn't mention that. Just spray some WD-40 up in there. Take a rag, just wipe around the collar, okay. That way it's fairly clean. All right, again, I really don't worry too much. Tell my brake pads, I just changed them at Mid-Ohio about halfway through the weekend, so they're looking stellar. All that's great. You can see there's literally a puddle sitting in there. There's another puddle sitting down there. And when you get done, you know, when you're cleaning, you're literally just spraying it, and then you're coming in here and working all your bits, and take that excess that's gotten on there and just wipe the arms down, wipe everything down, and that's how you're going to get this thing clean. And being clean is going to be the #1 thing. We've already seen guys take pictures of their ball joints absolutely packed full of crud. Well, how much movement are you going to get out of that ball joint when it's packed full of crud? You're not going to get a whole lot of, you know, and then you're going to start getting it to bind up, and like especially in the back, you're going to break them upper control arm bolts when you hit a hard curb when these things can't move. All right, and now obviously with the car assembled, there should be like no play in that thing. Those things are built to be tight, but obviously when you're at force doing 100 miles an hour and hit a curb, it moves. So I'm just going to continue this around all the way around the outside of the car, all 4 corners. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm going to give you a little tour around. I just cleaned these parts. I mean, guys, they're not perfectly clean. The rest of the car still needs to be cleaned. I'll put the body together, and I use Mother's V12, I think it's called, rubber remover. Works fantastic for wiping the car down. As you can see, there's still WD-40 sitting in there. Now I will add that these do have little Zerk fittings on them. You could take little needles and squirt in there. In my experience thus far, I wear these rod ends out so quick, whether I lube them with a needle or not. And so I've just given up on it, and I've literally just been using WD-40, cleaning them, keeping them maintained, keeping an eye on them. They're super cheap. When you get a little bit of movement in one, whether it's a tire rod end, inside or out, they're super easy to replace. Just replace them. There's really no sense on messing with it. Okay, but now I've got a few spots where I had my paint markings get wiped off, so I've got to go back through and again, guys, I'm not, you know, you're not cleaning this thing to be spick and span. I've still got some more wiping down and cleaning that I'll do, and I'll lubricate the chain, you know, and you just sit there and just cycle it through while you're spraying it. It's easiest to do when it's in the air. Okay, you want to inspect it, make sure you don't have any damage to any of the sprocket ends either side or to the chain itself, just to make sure it's not coming apart best you can tell. Okay, but again, everything is still kind of coated in WD-40 a bit, still puddles sitting in my ball joints and all of that. Okay, everything's, you know, relatively clean, lubed up, moving good. Okay, I'm still gonna have to take a hose and kind of clean some of this mud and stuff out of here, and some of this duct tape we had on here from Mid-Ohio when we thought we were gonna go rain racing. I haven't, I guess I missed a couple pieces, but just trying to protect from water getting into things. Outside of that, I'd say it's up to you. You could bleed the brakes in between every weekend. I think that would be totally overboard. This car is so light. Most tracks, you're not even getting the brakes hot enough. You can come off the track and touch the wheels, and they're not hot like you would in a big, heavy, you know, 4,000-pound car. So outside of that, I mean, that pretty much covers most of the maintenance items that I do in between a track event. From here, I'm going to do a little bit more wiping down, a little bit more cleaning up of some things. But as far as all the items that need to be addressed, I've addressed them. I mean, obviously you want to do all your safety stuff, keep an eye on your harnesses, and you can make sure that you don't have any extra play in any of your steering control couplers and all of that. Make sure all of your wiring ends and bits and everything is nice and tight. And I've added a few extra zip ties in a few spots where I just wanted to be sure that everything was secure, but I'm sure that the way that it was when it came to me was fine. I'm not sure. My next track event, I'll probably have to change my front sprocket again. Right now I've got a 15 on it from running at Mid-Ohio, but that's pretty much it, guys. I mean, from here I put the tires back on. You know, I've made sure that the back brakes were good. You want to make sure that you don't check the back brakes from here, as the rotor actually doesn't use the entire pad. So there's this little bit of pad that wears right here on the outside edge. So in order to check your back pads, you really want to come in here and check them at the rotor. And I know it's dark, you probably can't see, but still got plenty of pad there. But you know, from here, put the tires back on, put the body shells back on. I guess I probably got some body work to do. Still haven't decided if I'm gonna refiberglass and just fix this fender and have less stickers to replace, or if I'm gonna just replace the fender and do a makeover of the car. I'm taking 2 months off from tracking, and just, so I may paint the car, and next time you see it, it might look totally different, it might look the same, I don't know, we'll see. But, and you know, of course, if you're splittering, catching you some cat, I guess I shouldn't say that, that's probably really inappropriate. But yeah, so just a little video, a little bit of tidbits on how I maintain things. I'm located 45 minutes south of Charlotte. If anybody owns a Rush and you live in the Charlotte area, I know my shop looks like a mess. It doesn't always quite look this bad, but I would be more than happy to help you with any of this stuff. If you wanted to just drop the car off and have me go over it, I'd be perfectly happy to do that. I am considering doing arrive and drives at some point and maybe getting another car or two. We'll see. I guess it just depends on the demand and, you know, how many people reach out to me inquiring about it to see if it's worthwhile me making the investment to do. The car is absolutely a blast. I recommend anybody who loves tracking to get one. It's so much cheaper than driving my Camaro was. You know, to track my Camaro in 1 year, I was easily spending $50,000 a year. Tracking this thing is half that, if that. Now, the harder you drive and the more curbs you hit and the faster you are, the faster you will wear things out. Full disclosure, if you drive like grandpa and just are out there holding at the back of the pack, that's totally cool. Parts are gonna last you a whole lot longer than they're gonna last me, rightfully so. You know, I'm gonna put 2 tires in the dirt if it gets me an advantage, and obviously that's gonna wear stuff out. So but feel free to comment, like, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Obviously I'm not a content creator, but if anybody asks if I can make a video about something else, I'd be happy to do it. I'm sure that I've got some other stuff on here that I'll break and have to fix. So if there's anything else that you're curious about, or maybe you have one and need to fix something and you're not near me and would like to know how to do it, shoot me a message, whatever, and if I can do it, I'll definitely do it. Thanks.